Any music. All right, there's our little AI intro, courtesy of our friend Blackbeard. Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 7 of CLS After Dark. I'm your host, Mark. You can see I brought back two of kind of our usual suspects. We got Patrick and Clint, and I'll introduce those guys in a second. Let me just tell you what the nature of this video is. And then, of course, I got to start it off with a Steve L. dad joke. But tonight we're going to have a very serious conversation. The title is called The Homeland. We are not going to discuss too much of the current operations that are taking place over in the Middle East, well, throughout the whole Middle East. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but that really isn't the focus that myself, Clint, Patrick, and the three of us have all been talking offline for before this happened and recently. And these are the areas we're going to focus on, I think, are of like the paramount concern to us and maybe to some of you boys and girls, right? Because, we're not, we're, like I said in my little short video, we're just folk now, right? We're all in here. We're all civilians. We have jobs, we have our businesses, we have families. We're not out there conducting combat operations. And there is a huge difference. Clint can say this, Patrick can say it, and any of you boys and girls who served in uniform and been, over in one of the sandboxes or the garden place vacation spots, you know what I'm talking about. You're switched on, you're constantly in the red. And even when you're back, if you're at a fob and you're going all the way back to, the green zone or whatever the case is, even then you're not totally in the white. You're still at a pretty heightened level of awareness, security. If you were in the Army, maybe depending on your unit, when you were in cantonment, in your fob, in the perimeter, you may not have been walking around in, what was that, Patrick? Condition 0 or condition 1, like all these different conditions, do you have a round do you have a magazine in the weapon? Do you have a round in the chamber, et cetera, et cetera? But you were there and you were in that zone. And and I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying your brain clicks into it. You deal with the stress a lot differently. And it doesn't impact you the same way because you also got all these pipe swingers around you who are there for the same task and purpose. That's not what most of us are doing anymore, right? You're here watching this. I'm assuming you're not in uniform over there because you probably shouldn't be paying attention to me. Keep looking at, look at your sector of fire, buddy. But so that's going to be the focus tonight, talking about the homeland, like where we think the threats reside, how they may present themselves. But more importantly, a lot of the more positive steps that you can take right now and you should take. You should be taking at all times because, security is just one aspect of preparedness. If you want to go food, fire, water, shelter, well, then you need to add another 4 food groups: shoot, move, communicate, medicate. These are, or whatever, get home or back home or whatever acronym you want to use. But if you understand self-reliance and that no one's coming to save you, and no matter how much you like your government, whether it's Team Red or Team Blue, they don't care about me and you. And if they do, it's going to take forever and a day to try to get to your community and help you. So you really have to take a lot of this burden on your shoulders. And as a Christian, just to throw in my own little 2 cents, and I'll shut up and introduce our guests, I think that's kind of what it's expected of us. It's not even expected. It's required, no, you're supposed to do these things, right? So on that note, before I do the jokes, let me introduce our guest, then we'll do the joke and then we'll jump into it. So why don't we just go, let's do it differently. Let's start from the bottom to the top, Mm-hmm. It's going to be one of those days, boys and girls. All right, Clint, why don't you take us in, sir? Just give everybody a little, they've seen you, but still, just in case somebody hasn't.
Hey, my name's Clint. My main background is mostly in the military. Spent 25 years in the military, mostly in special operations. And a lot of that was with some of the stuff we're going to be talking about. While I was still in special operations, I was one of the level 2 force protection instructors for my unit. Spent a lot of times in some of the anti-terrorism schools and things like that, which is what Mark and I were talking about the other day about current events that are going on and kind of the security posture that, we inherently, is exactly what Mark was just saying. Once you live a large portion of your life living in those those categories of security, it kind of becomes natural when you start seeing things that are going on out there in the world. You kind of start paying attention to what you're doing, where you're sitting, you're scanning, you're watching, and these are inherent things that you do over a long period of time, and you get good at those things. So we're going to talk about a few of those this evening.
Dan Skippy. P. Rick, let's come up to you, sir.
Hey, well, good evening, and thanks for having me back again. Just way of background. Let's see. I started off as a Marine long ago, moved into law enforcement, came back into the military after 9/11, ended up working with Mark at CIA for about 7 years, and then moved back into law enforcement realm, stayed in the military on the reserve side, retired after 28 plus years, and then with all the law enforcement stuff, I've had a good taste of local stuff, doing patrol, narcotics, SWAT, all that fun stuff. And I currently work for DHS, and I'll enter my disclaimer here that all opinions expressed by me tonight will not reflect those of the Department of Homeland Security. Those are mine and mine alone. So, but I will say that I'm going to go ahead and follow off of what Clint said is we need to express as much as we can self-reliance and awareness in today's climate, especially with what's going on around the world.
I just want to add one caveat in there. So P. Rick started off enlisted. When he retired as a warrant. I started off enlisted, and then I Mustanged into the officer corps. I retired as a captain. So I don't know any of you guys want to get into an argument who outranks who. He's a warrant, so he's going to say he outranks me. At the end. So, but both of us were enlisted before we went into those other echelons. And then I'm your host. You already know who I am. Centerline Systems, military background. You heard Patrick talk about it. Matter of fact, where Patrick and I first met each other was in a reconnaissance platoon for an air assault infantry unit in the National Guard. And then we were on the training team for 20th Group. And then I disappeared. And then one day out of nowhere, here's P. Rick. And I'm like, whoa, what up, dude? So, hey, anyway, so, and then, obviously we just said the agency and stuff. So that's kind of my background. And so, we've, between the three of us, this isn't bravado and this isn't a dick measuring contest. I don't mean it anything in that sense at all. There's going to be plenty of people out there who have very similar experiences, even though they've never been in uniform, right? So again, we're just going to kind of use our backgrounds and our shared experiences to try to communicate, kind of how we view this, the situation, these international, these current events, and maybe, and try to offer you steps, assurances, and some other opportunities where you could take some proactive measures to not be a victim. All right. And then, so that's going to be kind of what we're going to do here in a second. And I think we're going to start it off so you can just hear everybody's opinion because, here, I'll just kind of, no, it's not fair. I'll save that until after. Let me do the joke first, and then I'll kind of do the opinions, and then we'll get into the actual meat of the subject here. My joke for tonight. Now, I'll get to the comments here. I see we got Triple X in the house, and he said, better be a good joke tonight. Well, Triple X, we don't have you for the drum roll, but I do have a joke that's specifically for you. I'll start with you, Patrick, and I'll end it with Clint. Hey, Patrick, what's the best gift you can give? Just say, I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
A broken drum. Nobody can beat it.
There
you go.
It's a hardcore dad joke right there.
There you go, George. When we have that drum roll, George. All right, real quick, shout outs for everybody because you guys are taking the time to be here and we really appreciate that. You know the deal. Like, subscribe, share, comment on comments, all that stuff. Learn me something, tries to get me to remember to say I just did. Gene with a big woo. And this was before we started. Gene, that was me to Gene. And then he's like, puff away, I got it. And then we got Tennessee in the house. Howdy, Gene. Those guys were talking. Snowshoe checking in. Tennessee saying hi to Snowshoe. Everybody saying hi to Tennessee. We got Sea Sailing, Minnesota. Gene, hey, Tennessee. And then we got a couple more. And then thanks. Oh, then Gene saying, well, hear me real quickly. Thanks for your service, all the boys and girls around the world. Amen to that. Tennessee, the original nemesis in the house. Good to see you, Clint. We got the Husky bunch here too. Wow. Hey, y'all. George better be a good joke tonight. I hope you better have played that. You better have played your app when I did that joke, George. I'll do another one at the end. Clint and Dave, Clint and P-Rick there, George. Way to go, buddy. Clint and Patrick. Yeah, learn me something. We got that. Somebody's saying we need Gimli to make the 4 horsemen. And then we'll end it right there. This is how I know you are. And that's a good joke. Everybody should know how that joke goes. That's how I know you are, blank, blank, blank. It's from a movie. And George and I have been doing that for probably 15, 20 years to each other now, but where we first started it. All right, here we go. We're going to jump into it. I will kind of say this at the beginning, and I'll circle back to the end if anyone's interested. And I'm not trying to promote me. I wrote my master's thesis on nuclear, biological, and chemical terrorism. If anyone is interested in reading it, you can just email me at mark@center-line-systems.com. I'll gladly send it out to you if you want to just read it. And because I think a lot of what I wrote in that thesis is what you're going to kind of hear echoed tonight, because you're talking to 3 kind of common sense people who don't have their heads up in the clouds. And that was one of my main arguments against that I thought it was very unlikely that we would see. And there's a lot of nuances here. What's terrorism? What type of terrorist, or, what type of different terrorist organizations are there? Then I broke down nuclear, biological, chemical weapons. These things are not as easy as it sounds to weaponize or to bring to bear. Most countries that are capable of doing that are actually advanced nation states. Iran is one of those. And without giving anything away, I'll just say a quick story. So this is in 2000 and something, and I'm watching military ISR. I'm a ground branch. I'm in the agency, and I'm with some military guys. I'm looking at some ISR, and I watched this drone fly through, and I knew that. I'm like, dude, that's a drone. This is an MSS. This is that country's kind of equivalent of me conducting cross-border operations, the IRGC, something like that. That's what's going on right there right now. And nobody seemed to give a blankety blank about it or get it. So, so that's going to be my weird little segue into, and I'll give these guys, I want them to have a chance if they want to say their feelings of this. If Iran's such a threat, it's like that, Moneyball. Hey, if he's such a good batter, why doesn't he bat good? If Iran gets nuclear weapons, so what? There's a ton of other countries. Pakistan has nuclear weapons. We're not losing any sleep over that. And look, and I'm not defaming the good people of Pakistan, but that government is known to harbor and support terrorist organizations, just like Iran does. You could make that same argument on the other side of the coin about Israel. They've got nuclear weapons. So again, if they bat so good, if he's such a good batter, why doesn't he bat so good? If this is such a huge threat. Now, my argument would just be this. We've got so much stuff going on in America. This to me does not seem the right thing to do and at the right time. If you want to make an argument that we should do this to Iran, then I'm going to counter with, then we need to go all the way back to the Carter era. And we did try Desert One, but maybe that wasn't what we should have tried to have done, and why did we just stop and quit there? Like, if this was such an existential threat, we should have dealt with it a long time ago. And if this nuclear weapon stuff, well, then what was that last bombing campaign? How did that not succeed? So there's kind of my argument, you see, and I'm also a very strict constitutionalist, but here's where these 2 gentlemen have I see their point. I don't know if I necessarily 100% agree, but I understand where they're coming from. And we're all adults, and we should be able to have adult table conversations and not, rip each other's heads off. So there's my opening salvo just to get that out. And then I'm going to turn it over to Patrick and Clint to respond as you see fit, or just give your opinion on what's going on. And then we'll move into the nuts and bolts. Who wants to go first? I'm going to
Clint, you want to go?
Yeah, Clint.
I'll just start out. I'll lateral this ball to you after I pitch this one. But I think when we initially started discussing the current operations that are going on, we all, like I said, this has kind of been our life. So we can kind of take pieces of a puzzle and start putting things together, and you kind of start seeing things in a broader sense. And we do that. because of our backgrounds. And at least the way that I see this right now, and there's a lot of discussion out there. This is one chess move at the beginning of a lot of chess moves that is really boxing some people in. So is it right? No. I mean, after 20 years of Iraq and Afghanistan, I mean, it's very unsavory to want to get into any more, you know, combat operations in the Middle East. But as we talk about business, our economy, things that are happening to us, the devaluation of the dollar, these are chess moves that are happening right now that will lead on to boxing in some of the bigger players out there that are trying to devalue our currency and really hurt the economy even more. You know, so I guess off of what Mark was just saying, I see the current operations as just an opening salvo to really get control of a lot of the oil, which oil are basically the entire world is ran off of oil, no matter what currency it is. You know, the dollar, the petrodollar. But if we don't get control of Iran, and now we've got control of Venezuela somewhat, I think those are the first steps to trying to realign things that are getting out of control. But I'll end on this and pitch it to Patrick. I mean, we've got some real big problems going on here right now, and when we start finding out that upwards of $21 trillion has been stolen, you know, I mean, we've got to get into this fraud, and the people that have been involved in the fraud are fighting it like an inoculation. You know, they don't want to be outed. You know, so I mean, yes, we've got our own big problems here, but all of that theft and the devaluation of the dollar, I think, is what is leading to a lot of this geopolitical posturing. Off to Patrick.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot. And, I would agree with that. So we were looking at things. I think we talked about this a few podcasts back, maybe several podcasts back. We talked about the form, or I guess you'd call it forms of warfare or levels of warfare. And the acronym is DIME, right? So diplomacy. We weren't having any diplomacy with Iran. It wasn't happening. Yeah, we'll consider it. We'll consider it. Delay. Let's rebuild and get ready to strike again. The information side, all the media, our own media included, is now questioning everything we do. That feeds into like going back to the Congress and that type of thing. And this is where I'll disagree with Mark and understand how the way things are supposed to work, but right now, like, we can't agree on anything, and we're so polarized that if you were to ask for permission to do something in a timely fashion, that's never going to happen. Now we're at the military stage where we're actually taking out military infrastructure, leadership, command and control, the whole thing. And then what Clint touched on is the economy, the economic effects around the globe. How is that going to impact the rest of the world, to include our adversaries? The Chinese get a lot of Iranian oil. I mean, Russia, maybe a small bit, but Russia's been described as a gas can or a gas station with a military. So they've got their own stuff. But I think it was well timed. I'm glad that we did it. From a standpoint, like Mark brought up, Pakistan and other countries that have nuclear weapons. Those folks haven't come out and openly advocated for the destruction of the United States like like Iran has. I'll take it back. It's a kind of like a personal note. Not that I was there. This is when I was like in junior high or high school, but the Marine barracks bombing in 1983. That was shortly after the revolution. The embassy bombing. I want to say it was over 400 some people killed in that, and that was tied to Lebanese Hezbollah, and of course they were supported by Iran in that. So to me, this has been a long time coming, and they've had it coming, and I'm praying for the people that are there that are also celebrating the removal of the regime, so that they can hopefully have some type of normal life, and that can actually turn into like I'm not going to say free country, not like ours, but freer, not living under total oppression anymore. So, yeah, I'll leave it right there.
All right, boys and girls. Hey, if you want to leave a comment, if you watch this on demand, or if you want to leave a comment in the chat, I'll be paying attention to that. Tell us what you think is going on and why. Again, you can hear echoes of everything I said in both of their comments. And just to kind of highlight, Patrick, I mean, I disagree, but I totally agree. Just look at our form of politics in America, let alone, the rest of Western Europe. How are you going to go do the constitutional thing? I mean, we've got, both sides of the same bird using the rules when they want to the rules to apply and when they don't, and all this hypocrisy. And, I mean, it'd be like herding cats, or trying to sort a box of clothes hangers, it just would be next to impossible. So yeah, at what point, what are you going to do? You can't just roll over and die. You can't give up. And then kind of to that point, a long time coming. My only argument to that would be, well, then we should have done it before. And if we're going to do it now, then we have to have a clear exit strategy. We have to have thought this through, both in terms of, like I used to call it, PB&J. It's not the right acronym, but I used to have to do a public relations blowback type of paragraph in my ConOps, my concepts of operations, my op orders. You'd have to think about what's the second and third order effect of my operation on HVT, whatever, amongst the civilian local population. Have we considered that stuff? Do we have an exit strategy? Do we really have allies that are on our side? You never want to go to war without allies, a plan. You want to execute it quickly, and you want to get the hell out of there. So I personally think we're missing a lot of that. And then the other thing, and I'm going to kind of link everything together, bring it back to Clint, is, if you're going to do this, there has to be clear, you have to take a very hard look at the economics. Now, for the last couple episodes, I've been calling it, when I had, Triple X on, we were calling it the new order. So I've been formulating that thought for a while now, and we just started talking about it. But that's what I think Clint just had hit on, and to some extent, Patrick as well. I mean, there is a new order. There is definitely something going on behind the scenes. I'm hoping, I'm thinking, because otherwise this all looks pretty retarded to me on surface level. But, behind the scenes, hopefully there is, because, we got these moves, Venezuela, Cuba. I mean, you could make a humanitarian argument. What we're doing is horrible. We're starving the people of Cuba. But are we really doing it, or is the Cuban regime? And the Cuban regime has done a lot of stuff to us, just like Patrick's saying. Hey, Iran they're not an innocent party in this conversation. They may not have struck first in this situation, but by proxy and by funding, both direct and indirect support, they have definitely killed Americans. And they've done that, even in the most recent Forever War. If anybody goes back to that period of time, remember, we had IEDs. That's what the big thing was. But then suddenly something changed, and we had what were they called again? Electronic EFPs, electronically forced projectiles, or
explosively formed projectiles.
Yeah, not electronically.
Yeah.
And that's basically, they figured out how to make a shape charge out of the IEDs so it would have more penetration. That technology didn't come from the Shia militias down in Basra and Sadr City. That came through their association with Shia militias, IRGC types over in Iraq. So, so again, those are legitimate points. However, we still need to have all these other exit strategies. But what I'm most concerned about, and this is why I'm going to shut up and turn it to Clint, is the economic side of it. I don't know what the real number is right now. I've already seen people trying to break this down and crunch the numbers. How many missiles do we, have we claimed to have fired or that they've seen? There's a lot of fake AI videos going on out there right now too, boys and girls. That's not what real combat looks like. That's not what real missile strikes look like. But so just be cautious of what you're looking at. Oh, look at all this. Like, yeah, that didn't happen. That's total AI. Well, what's not AI, just so you can see where I'm coming from. When you watch those F-15s, that one falling through the sky, you see how that falls. Aircraft don't fall out of the sky because they're aerodynamic. Even when they're falling, they don't just fall and make a hole in the ground and totally disintegrate, and we don't have any evidence. That's not how airplanes crash, right? So just think about that and throwing out some other conspiracy theory stuff. But back to Clint, there's all kinds of issues here on the economic front, and we're in big trouble as it is already. And we're spending probably, I guarantee the number's at least $500 million in expenditures just to forward project all those forces, right? None of that stuff's free. It costs money to create those machines of war, to outfit them, to arm them, to man them, to fly them, fuel them, maintain them, move them halfway across the country. It's damn impressive what Uncle Sugar can do. No one else in the world can do what we just did, but that cost a ton of money. So the trade-off better be worth the expenditure, the cost-benefit analysis. Otherwise, and this is where I'll shut up and bring it over to Clint, because I don't think this was the right card to play, in my opinion, for economic reasons almost alone. Clint, I don't know if you want to pick that up and run with that, or
I was formulating a thought, but so
that was the smoke. That was why I saw the smoke coming out of Patrick's ears.
I'll pick it up and run with it, though. Of course, with the conspiracy stuff, when we start talking about, I don't get real steamy over any politicians. They all, if they're there too long, start having problems. They need to have, everyone needs term limits. But for a long time, we've had our eye off of a lot of geopolitical stuff with the last administration. Nobody was talking to nobody. A lot of things were starting to unravel, and I mean, they've been unraveling because a lot of skullduggery has been going on in our own country that we need to take care of. We can't take care of our own problems right now, let alone these bigger chess moves that are out there. But there are also things that need to be paid attention to when we start having multiple countries start align to devalue and cripple our dollar. We've got to start looking outside of not only what we our own problems, but what's going on outside the country. So as we're trying to chew gum and do hopscotch at the same time, we're trying to take care of some of these problems. I caught some of the stuff just a little bit on the news today with Waltz and the attorney general up there in Minnesota. I mean, this thing is getting so bad, and we haven't even really started getting into the other states. We've known that this has been going on for a long time. When Doge come in and they started pulling at strings, we really started getting some information about where all this money was going and how we're getting into this immense debt, national debt we're getting into, is because so much of it is being stolen. And when I start hearing 21 trillion stolen, I mean, that's incredible. So, but as we have these exterior threats that are trying to hobble us, knock us off the pedestal, we've got to pay attention to these things that are going on overseas. And I think even though people are all saying right now, well, this is all Israel, we're doing this for Israel, we're being controlled by Israel. I don't want to get too far into that. But, I'll tell you what, when I see Trump's a boss, man. He's really freaking, he knows what he's doing, and he's toppling this stuff that is really outside threats against us. We won't be able to get our own house in order if we're attacked from outside. And China, Russia, India playing both sides of the coin. We got Iran, Venezuela, and we're just starting to knock them down. And when we knock those first two down, now we've got Putin coming back in saying, you know what, we got to talk about this thing in Ukraine. Let's get this, because really at the end of the day, Putin wants e-commerce. He wants to get his economy going, and he really would like us to normalize things better. But Europe has really helped us get real far into this thing, into Ukraine, and it's real bad, and it needs to stop. We need to start focusing on some more important things, some commerce. So I don't know if that was kind of all over the place, but man, there's so much that we're consuming, and you're trying to look at the bigger picture out there, but there's big things. We got big problems here, we got big problems over there, and we got to deal with them all at the same time, unfortunately.
Yeah, I want to come back to a couple of things you said. And before I turn it over to you, Patrick, I do think there's a solid argument being made there. And I'm not saying this was Clint's argument, but I think there's a solid argument that a lot of this is distraction, because there are people out there who would be willing to use the Ring of Sauron to fight Sauron, right? A J.R.R. Tolkien reference. You've heard me say it before. I can use the e-files to get these other players to do what I want because these are all the donor class, the rich elite, and it'll be so disruptive to our government or our economy. So I'm going to use the Ring of Sauron to get these guys to play ball because, to Clint's point, we've got to get this economic house in order. I'm just being a devil's advocate, because, we've got to get this economic house in order. There is a new order. I don't want to say a new world order. That's kind of the old, very, bald-headed evil villain, James Bond kind of phrase. But there is a new order. There is a new game afoot. We are shifting into that multipolar world as opposed to the unipolar world. There's no doubt about it. If Iran is able, you see, now I'm getting too deep into Iran. Iran is a very diverse country. It's a very old country. Everybody thinks it's Muslim. No, they're Persian, and I don't know what the exact breakdown between Arab and Persian within the demographics of Iran, but it's a Persian country. It's got a great history and they're very proud people. So, what do we think the threshold is to get them to topple their government? Is that the plan? What if they aren't successful? I saw a report about Kurds. Well, okay, Kurds aren't Persians. How's that going to go over? So there's all these second and third order effects that have to be taken into consideration. But I think one of Clint's main points there, if Iran and to Patrick's point too, it's an axis of evil. To use kind of a George Bush term, but they're not our buddies. Yes, they haven't overtly attacked us, but they have definitely tried covert and clandestine things. They've killed Americans. You can only scream death to America so long. Again, maybe you're not going to do it, but you're hoping some other knucklehead in some other place hears your chant and does it for you. So, these aspects of the argument are real, but I think it's maybe a new form of warfare. And this is where I'm going to turn it over to Patrick and then, Clint, let you stew on this because you brought it up. This asymmetric warfare just means, something that you're not intending. It's asymmetrical. It's not, doesn't necessarily mean one-sided, right? But, you're coming at it from an unconventional thought, and that's Clint. That's his background. What if we've entered into a new area of warfare that we aren't privy to, and it's economic warfare? We already know that they've been using population and language as a form of warfare within the United States. That's for sure. That's asymmetric warfare right there. What if it's also on the economic front, and we've got people who see just how much trouble we're in economically, and if we don't win these next couple battles, even if it depletes the resources, we're going to be in big trouble. So a big picture, Patrick, I want to come to you and then let Clint maybe rebut it. And then I want to get into the specifics of the more asymmetric, unconventional warfare side. But that was a damn good point, Clint. Yeah, this could just be a new form of warfare that we're just not used to seeing how it's played out because it hasn't been played out before.
Yep. Amen. Let's see. So I guess I'll address the thing with the Israel's driving this whole thing, that type of stuff. I would ask both of you, for the listening audience, who do you think has a better read on what goes on in Iran on a daily basis, the Mossad or the CIA or any of our other Five Eyes partners?
Okay. Hey, in the chat, answer the question. I already know my answer. Who has a better read of what's going on in Iran? Mossad, and M for Mossad, C for CIA. And what did you say?
Any of the Five Eyes partners. Let's say the
Five
Brits
Eyes. And
or
Five Eyes, that's
else.
the 5 other countries we share intel well. So New Zealand, Australia, Great Britain, Canada. Yeah. So
yeah,
I got an M for Mossad so far.
I'd say learn me something is on. That's where I was going, because hey, if you've got a nation that every day spouts your destruction and you've got people like in a close proximity that want to destroy you, you better get to know that enemy pretty well, and they have. Obviously, they got to know the enemy pretty well with that pager operation, which I'd love to see that come out someday, how they pulled that off. I've heard some snippets about how they did marketing and all these different things. Just hats off to him for that, right? This is not a political or religious thing. It's just recognizing, excellence in preparation and execution of operations, right? So they had the targets. We've got the resources. What's that old song? I've got the brains, you've got the looks. Let's make lots of money. This time it's like, let's hit lots of targets, right? And that's what's gone on. So I think the timing was right on this thing. And that, to everybody that sits and, oh my God, why, right now is not the right time for this. Maybe, how do we know? Right. And maybe it was the perfect time to do it. They were starting to rebuild everything that we blew up a few months back. That wasn't for fun. They were keeping the IAEA inspectors out. That's not by happenstance. So they didn't want to negotiate. So I think it was time. So there's my take on the Israeli thing and them driving it. I think it was more us, because we've got the brawn, right? We've got the tools. I mean, we even help support Israel with their Iron Dome to keep them from getting smoked. So there's that. Back to the economic side and then the information side. So and this is something people can look up, but there is I guess it's a newer term that falls under the information form of warfare called cognitive warfare.
Yeah.
Cognitive warfare seeks to change people's minds and shape opinions. So it's not, information warfare would be like, hey, I'm going to send 50, emails and, like snail mails to Clint. And if he sees enough of them, maybe he'll eventually, fall prey to whatever it is I'm trying to shape his thoughts on. Cognitive warfare is using AI. It's using all the social media that learns everything about us. And then now it's like you yourself are being, helping this process. So that's something that we all need to be mindful of right now. With social media, with what we look at, being, diversifying your information, that type of thing, and then questioning, hey, why am I pissed off all the time? What about this? What about that? Is it really that bad? Notice that on a patriotic front, we just had a lovely moment where, our U.S. men's hockey team won the gold medal, and everybody was, totally on board with that, myself included, loved it. Let's get that out. Let's get that out. Let's start talking about these other bad things that are going on. Why is that? And it boils down to it's your fear center. Fear. That's the old saying that if it bleeds, it leads. That's true. And so even the cognitive warfare is our own media that does this to us. And I don't care what brand you watch or station you listen to or anything, they're all guilty of it. So we've got to also be mindful of that from just a mental health standpoint, because believe it or not, we're not just like, random, observers of this stuff. We are players in all of this. We are players because what just happened, we've just already had one lone wolf attack down in Texas. There will be more. There will be more. So speaking of unconventional warfare, that type of thing, I mean, what has Iran done for decades now? They've run proxy terror organizations. They've got cellular structures. I can tell you from working in and around the government for, the bulk of my adult life, the government is usually going to be able to respond to something after it happens. We, the individual, are the ones that are going to be responding and being and experiencing whatever that threat is. So it behooves all of us to keep our wits about us, to keep a positive mindset, to keep our bodies healthy. And if you are, inclined to, carry firearms or, practice anything unarmed skill, you should probably always maintain that. These are tools that we have. And the argument that I always give folks that say that they don't have time or the money, it's like, well, do you have car insurance? Yeah. Well, why do you have car insurance? Well, the state makes me have it. Yeah. But do you have like the cheapest car insurance? No. Why don't you spend time on yourself? Like put some effort into that, because you never know when you could not only save your own life, you could save someone else's life just by simply being aware and calling things out. So I'll get off my little soapbox there.
It's a pretty good soapbox. Again, just a little highlight, bringing it back over to Clint. We're getting into kind of the nuts and bolts, but agree. We can agree and we can disagree on shoulda, woulda, couldas. And who's to say? I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. Maybe there will be something. The more I keep probing, or the more I keep punching you in the ribs, maybe eventually, it's not banging my head against the wall, the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Combat's not like that. Things break, things snap, alliances can collapse, form, breakthroughs happen just like that, so you don't know what you don't know. And, and that's just kind of the nature of it. So there is a little bit of that element there. And then if we're in a completely different form of warfare, and that's propaganda, that's, shaping the battlefield from that mental perspective. It is AI. You could start making some arguments, you can see that taking place throughout the West, breakdown of family, breakdown of religion, breakdown of masculinity. I mean, that is it. That's shaping that battlefield. Would you rather come in and fight, what's that movie? What's his name? Tom Cruise. It's a science fiction movie where he doesn't know he's a clone. And then he realizes like the aliens cloned him and he's the one who invaded Earth or whatever. But, do you want an army of, cloned Clints, or do you want an army of some purple haired guy who, who can't lift 20 pounds or do one pull up? You know what I'm saying? So, you're going to want those kind of pipe hitters, on your side. But what if cognitively, again, cognitive warfare, you've eroded a society and you've got people to question everything and yell about everything. And again, it's all focused on me. How is this affecting me? Well, it could affect you because you could be hanging out at a bar and some rando shows up and starts shooting, and killing everybody. You could be sitting there watching this podcast right now and your electricity could go out. And, here in northern Minnesota, we had like 40 some degrees today. Totally, awesome. Really nice. But, it's going to be cold this weekend. And we're in this little cycle of cold and warm. But, normally it could be 20 below right now, 10 below. Yeah. What are you going to do with no power? How are you going to stay alive? How are you going to survive? My uncle, who has passed away, God rest his soul, when I first came out of the agency and I came back here, we'd sit and talk about this. And I have this class, I was developing a class called The First 72 Hours, talking about, preparedness and survivability. And he had a great line, and I use it to this day. He's like, no, Mark, because zombie apocalypse, we're all joking about that. And he's like, no, the real zombie apocalypse is all these people around here, 72 hours without their cell phones, the internet, their cash cards. That's going to be your zombie apocalypse. So bringing that into unconventional warfare, what does that even mean? What does that look like? So whatever's going on over there, is it happening here? Well, the answer is it has already happened here multiple times, whether it can be traced back to a nation state, North Korea, Iran, Libya, X, Y, and Z, or is it an ideology, a religion, an ideology? That's what leftism was. A lot of those terrorist groups in the 70s and 80s, they were just, ideologically aligned. Baader Meinhof wasn't the Red Army faction. Those were not the same groups, right? So it could just be that. And, and we're entering into more, again, of a religious / ideologically driven conflict, even though there's this underlying economic and information war behind the scenes. So Clint, again, from your broad and just learned perspective, how would you address that to people, and what would your recommendations be, or words of encouragement, or hey, everybody freak out? How would you address that to people, or what would you be willing to share with people?
Well, I'll tell you, it's kind of funny because around my house, a lot of time I'm the party pooper. I'm the one that's always thinking, is this a good idea? Do we really need to do this? Should we stay closer to home? How far are we going to extend ourselves out? And I think that, whether you're carrying a firearm or you're out, working on skills, whether it be first aid or, running a radio, a ham radio, all these skills that we can go out and acquire. First off is really looking, one, you're looking at what's going on domestically. How bad is it getting right now when things are going on up there in, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and it's looking bad. And now it's starting to spread over here and spread over there. You're seeing a little in Atlanta, you're seeing a little in, Los Angeles, and you start going, man, things are getting a little weird. Do we really want to run up to Atlanta right now to go shopping, when we could go somewhere else? That's one thing. And then you start looking at, then boom, a major thing like this happens within, the geopolitical sphere. And you start looking, okay, now we got the layers of what's going on domestically. We've got what's going on internationally. Somebody has to be the sensible one in the group and say, hey, do we need to go to this, music festival over here or this concert? Maybe right now is not the time. And you kind of got to, I'm one of those people, man. I'm always looking for the exit. I like putting my back against the wall. I do that like a lot of everybody else does. But you really got to start looking at things and seeing as that threat level grows. And it's like initially, boom, this thing happens and you put your fists up, but they're waiting for you to relax and go, okay, everything's kind of feeling okay. And then bam, they catch you right then. Just like what happened down in Austin. You got a guy come bopping in there with a, flag shirt on. He's got a weapon. You have to be paying attention for that stuff. And if you're putting yourself and putting your family in those situations, you better be ready for it.
Patrick, you want to grab that and keep running?
Yeah.
That's kind of up your alley right there.
Yeah, it is. We talked a lot about this, right? So as far as, being prepared and being ready, it's a daily practice. I don't think anyone here is advocating that you walk around, in go mode 24/7. That's just not feasible. But I like to ask people, hey, define martial arts. What do you think martial arts are? Because it's not, some people wearing nice, crisp white gi, bowing to people and following the rules in some dojo about, hey, we're going to learn, Japanese, karate, we're going to do Brazilian jiu-jitsu, whatever the case is. It's not that at all. Martial arts, martial comes from the military, and think about that from like a historical perspective. I mean, that's we trained soldiers back in the day before firearms to use knives, swords, spears. It's hurling objects, slings, you name it, right?
Shields,
So
a shield.
yeah, shields. Yeah, the shield protects. It also can, it can hurt somebody. You can mess somebody up, right? So we start with, but before any of that happens, like you have to like start training your awareness, and that's the number one thing that's going to keep you alive is your awareness. Because I think at this point in life I've gathered enough skills where I feel pretty capable and I feel pretty effective if I had to respond to something. However, I'm a human being like anybody else. So if I'm walking around with one of these things and my attention is on this little 3x5 inch rectangular screen all the time, none of that matters. I just gave all that up. So looking at your environment, looking at people, like, here's a really good challenge to anybody, because it's become not the norm. This used to be a normal thing. Walking down the street or walking in a store, when you see somebody, hold their gaze for a second and then give them a smile. Look at them in the eyes and give them a smile. Notice how many people will look away and don't feel comfortable making eye contact anymore. Well, what are you doing when you do that? You are training yourself to look at people. And if someone were to look at you and say, hey, is this guy, is he a soft target? Is, he or she a soft target? Are they paying attention? If you're semi-physically fit, or let's say you're just carrying yourself well and you're looking at somebody in the face, they've already lost the element of surprise. So maybe they move to somewhere else, or maybe, by you simply watching them, if they're going to carry out whatever they're doing, you can intervene and stop it, or, ask for assistance. So that's step number one, is just, having the willingness to look at other human beings in the face. I mean, there's no punching. You don't have to wear any gloves, cups, or, mouthpieces for that. But it's just a great skill to have, right? the other piece that goes with this too is like understanding if this happens, it's not going to be like something on TV. It's not going to be, something where I'm set for this. There's no warm up. There's no, it just happens. So there's going to be a fear spike, an adrenaline spike that's occurring because that's not a normal event. This is now, in your mind, or maybe it is, it's a life and death scenario. That's not normal for most people. So you have to learn how to, work through that and turn that into something where instead of being threatened and scared by the event and, frozen into inaction, I can work through that and say, hey, what can I do? I'm not worried about what this person's going to do to me. I'm now thinking about what can I do to them to stop that. That's a huge leap right there, and that usually comes through some type of, physical training, some type of skill development, so on and so forth. So I encourage everybody, especially now with what's going on in the world. We've done it from the start of these podcasts, Mark, but we have to start doing that now because the Homeland attacks. That's why this is called the Homeland. Are very, very high right now. And back to, DHS, FBI, your local police, they're going to be there afterwards if to clean up the mess or to take the reports. You're in the game. You are the gladiator in this scenario. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Well, it's something off what Patrick was just saying, and I mean it's such a great point. We've become these what do they call that, clickbait, and just talking about clickbait is being distracted. You're constantly being distracted where you're not in the moment. You're not panning around. You're not making eye contact. You're not smiling at somebody. And when you do that, it makes your brain slow down and pick up things you ordinarily wouldn't be looking at because you're constantly distracted. And I see it all the time. I don't even know how anybody does it, walk around, they're staring at their phone while they're walking. I do it all the time. Doesn't matter where you go. I go out here to the military base and I'm sitting in there waiting for my appointment at the doctor, and 40 people are sitting in there at the pharmacy and every single person's on a device. It's startling, the distraction that people are allowing themselves to slip into. Put the phone down. Be in the moment, watch people, watch what's going on around you, and find that you enjoy not being distracted. Be in the moment.
And if I may, just a quick point of personal privilege on that, just a quick story, because, the overarching theme here is, it really doesn't matter if it's sleeper cells, a rogue, lone wolf actor, whatever that means, if it's, an actual state level, state sponsored terrorism, none of that matters. Because do you care what the philosophy, religion, or the technical terminology is? If you're suddenly in a mall or, having a beer and takes place, right? So it's that situational awareness, concentric rings of security, color coded levels of awareness. Think of your other, acronyms, get home. I just like, food, fire, water, shelter, shoot, move, communicate, medicate, 5W2H, these are questions you have to ask about every thought, statement, task, purpose. Who's doing it? Why are we doing it? What are we doing? How long are we doing? How many repetitions, how many people? It's that planning and just thought process that goes into it. So I'm doing a training exercise with a military unit. And it wasn't because of my military experience. I'm just an infantryman in the military. It was because of my agency experience. And so I'm like an observer, not really an observer controller, more of an observer for this thing. And I'm with a gentleman, another military guy, who kind of like Patrick, long story short, years and years ago, we were at Fort Irwin at the same time, and he remembered an event, and it was just funny. It's again, the military is huge, but it is also kind of small, especially when you get into those arenas. But anyway, he's been on this program for a while. I'm riding with him, and we're observing a parking lot. The reasons don't matter. We're observing this parking lot. I watch this lady come out of a store. She's already on her key fob. She's 50 yards from her car. I think she's thinking she's doing the Heisman run or something. But she hits her key fob. announces, flashes her car lights, opens up all of her doors, and she's still, like huffing and puffing to get there, and then gets there and then just puts her 6 o'clock to everything around her. She's in the back of her minivan. Situational awareness, horse blinders. Horses with horse blinders have more SA than this lady did. And we didn't even say a word. We just both looked at each other and we both immediately knew what we were both thinking. Like, talk about a victim, talk about being no situational awareness, totally in the white, totally like nothing's ever going to happen. And that's just not the case. Crime happens all the time. Acts of violence happen all the time. And again, whether this comes from a nation state, a terrorist organization, a lone wolf, there's plenty of crazy people in America. And I'm not even going to go down this road but just from a criminal perspective, for their own psychological objectives, reasons, imaginations, who conduct, heinous acts of violence against people. This could be you. So that is the reality of the world. And you'd be like, oh my God, our world's a horrible place. Yeah. Go back to the Paleocene or the Jurassic, at least you're not being attacked by saber-toothed tigers and T-Rexes every 3 seconds. You want to live in a stressful environment, our world's stressful, but that's nature. So, again, guys, if that kind of helps, other things that you can want to point out, again, rehearsals, drills, code words, areas to avoid, and I'm here to tell you, and again, if somebody wants to read the thesis, or I'm going to probably do this 72 hours class with the people over on the group chat, get a couple people, do it online, which wouldn't be my preferred, but that's what we can do. And then I might offer it to the Gen Pop for those who are interested. But, what is the nature of the threat almost doesn't matter. It's, to what Patrick's saying, and Clint are saying. How prepared are you? How aware are you? Have you taken this seriously? Again, on the economic side, do you have any cash? Just cash. I mean, no one can afford that cash anymore. Most people don't take it. But do you have a couple $100 in 5s and 10s? Because if the cash machines go out, you'll probably have 24 hours where they'll still take cash, and then things will change. You guys see what I'm trying to set you up for if you guys want to run with that? And then that'll kind of be taking our way out, because we're almost at an hour. But, again, I'll give you one more. If you have children, why aren't you taking a picture of your kids every day before they leave, so you know exactly what they're wearing? Because when you panic, to Patrick's point, when that realization hits you, and you've never been stressed like that before, you're going to panic. Maybe you will rise to the occasion. It's not what most people do. And you'll forget that you even had a kid or what the kid was wearing. Oh, ma'am, are you saying your kid left the house naked? No, I just don't know what they're wearing. Then take a picture, and if you're going to do something like that, take a picture of make sure their shoes are in it, and take a picture of their bottom of their shoes and their boots every now and then. That tread is very unique, and it'll be different from other shoe treads, right? So just, there's all kinds of little things, code words. I just posted something on my Instagram the other day that somebody else posted, but this is something I've taught and talked about and taught for a long time. Have code words, and they don't make them crazy, goofy, weird things. Think common sense, and then, kind of what Patrick's saying, and I'll shut up. But if you've got somebody who's doing the Pulse nightclub or the Charlie Hebdo type of things, they're just going to run around and kill anybody, right? But, if it's a different type of event or a different type of emergency, your kid freezing, just like anyone should do if they're lost in the woods, freeze. Maybe you go a little bit to find a more secure location, get a wall, behind your back, maybe find, a mother who's got a child, but you don't go walking a half mile to do that. You freeze, evaluate your situation. Maybe your dad's name is, Mark Patrick, you might say, Mr. Patrick, if you're saying mom or dad. So go back and see that post I made the other day. Again, I just repeated somebody else's post, because it's a lot of little things like that we can do right now. And then I'll shut it up and bring it over to Patrick. Man, rehearse, train, think, get out there, do some reps, do some push-ups, start practicing that jaw stroke. Start thinking your concentric rings of security. Start thinking your verbal commands. Know where all your exits are. Do you ever play the Kim's game? Do you walk into a room, just look at it for 5 seconds, and then close your eyes or turn away, and then try to identify everything that you see? That's an easy game you can do on a table. You turn your back, your spouse or your kids, you put a couple things on the table, you turn around, you just get a couple seconds, then you got to close your eyes and you got to identify everything on the table, where it is, its color, what it was, X, Y, and Z. These are a lot of good skills that I think a lot of people could be employing in their day-to-day grind right now. So that's my concluding comment on that, Patrick and Clint. Patrick, you want to kind of start it off and we'll bring it back over to Clint as we're wrapping it up?
Yeah, just to wrap it up. I mean, hey, there's always been plenty of threats in the homeland. Now there's a super elevated threat, and you don't know where things are going to happen. Bad guys, without being giving anything away that's not already in the news, but there's chatter about schools, about hospitals, hitting those real soft targets that are going to leave a really big impact. I mean, that's the focus of terrorism, right? So just being aware of this stuff, I really like what Clint was talking about. Hey, do a little thinking before you go out and drive around. So hey, I'll bring it back to the motto of Centerline Systems: keep thinking, keep moving, never quit. Keep thinking. You have to. And thinking, folks, is not staring at a phone and getting stuck in rage bait. Getting pissed off.
Nor is it staring at your phone waiting for Grok to tell you the answer. That's not thinking.
Right. So, thinking about your own, how does this impact me? Here's a real simple way to dilute things. If this doesn't impact me directly, why am I wasting time on it? Right. I mean, if you're going to spend money on a device, you're going to pay for the service, the Wi-Fi, and everything that goes with it. Why not make that a tool that you can help yourself with and not drive yourself crazy? That's just a basic premise. But I get it. The stuff's addictive, and you've got this cognitive warfare that's alive and well that drives us into that. So fight it every day. The other thing is, hey, don't fall into the trap of thinking, oh, America's screwed. We're going down the tubes and things are about to come apart at the seams. It's going to take a hell of a lot to have the United States of America completely fall apart. So that's part of cognitive warfare. They want you to believe that stuff, and unfortunately, some of our major news outlets are part of that. Being aware, just to be, being aware, being physical. No one has to, reach some kind of like, special operations level of fitness. You can just be a little bit better, eat a little bit healthier, go for a walk. You don't have to, do so many push-ups or, bench press a certain number. It doesn't matter. Just start doing something and be mobile, because, if something does occur, the number one rule, especially in me and Mark's world, and I'm pretty sure of Clint's world too, get off the X, get the hell out of there. I want to get out of there. I want to get away from that. Right. So that takes some physicality, maybe some athleticism to do. And, when that adrenaline spike comes, even if you're in fairly decent shape, that comes down on top of whatever activity you're doing, you might gas out pretty quick. And that just equates to you being less mobile and more of a target. So train with a purpose. And if I'll end on this little fun note, if you do find yourself ever in a situation where you're tussling with somebody to stop them from stabbing or shooting somebody, it's game on. You need to do everything you can to destroy that threat. Everything you can to destroy that threat. And I'll leave it there. So if you carry a firearm, you carry, an edged weapon, you carry, you got access to a pen, a pencil, a fork. It doesn't matter. You do what you got to do, and you execute that plan violently so that you can walk away.
The key and operative word is violently, boys and girls. That's not the time to be having, second thoughts and, and wishy-washy feelings about, again, I just saw this, two youth, beat somebody almost to death, and they gave him brain injury, and they got off with probation. This is in Europe, because the judge deemed that they didn't really mean to do them any harm. How a judge can get inside the heads of violent criminals and say, well, they didn't really mean to do that. Yeah, but they did it.
Yeah.
Right. And that person who was assaulted probably didn't think they were going to do it. And in today's day and age, that cognitive warfare and that just mental dissonance, probably, and we've seen this. We've seen people who've just been attacked in like Los Angeles or San Francisco then, start victim blaming or don't want any, like, well, but I don't want the police to get involved. I just want my car back, like, why do you think this happened in the first place? So that's a great point. Clint, let me bring it back over to you, sir.
Well, there's some great points there. I think, one of the things, I will say it again, I think disconnecting a lot of times and trying to be in the moment. And when you slow down and stop trying to ingest everything that's being fed to you all the time, it gets you to where you can't really focus on anything. You need to focus on the stuff that's important. It's like you said, when your kids leave the house, something like that. I mean, are you even in the moment enough to go, what are they wearing when they're leaving the house? You should be there enough and not be so distracted by things that are going on that you're not paying attention. Like I was also saying, this thing's real fresh, what's going on, outside the United States right now. And I thoroughly believe it's been put out. There's a lot of people here, a lot of bad people in this country right now. And you have to pay attention to where you're at, what you're doing, and exercise all those things. Do I really need to be out really late, up here running around, someplace that I'm unfamiliar with? Keep yourself in a safe place. Where you put yourself is where you're going to be. So, I think that, like I said, being in the moment, don't be so distracted. I love what Patrick was saying. The United States the world is a big place. I mean, not everything's just going to grind to a halt all at once. Even though the economy's bad, you can prepare for a lot of things, be ready for things, put yourself in the position that you want to be in. If you're ready, you leave the house, you're prepared, you're in the moment, you're watching what's going on, you'll probably be just fine if you know how to keep yourself out of a bad situation, and all of us, at least us three, and I'm sure many of the people that are watching, we've been to some pretty dangerous places, and you just get used to, that spidey sense is tingling. This is not where I should be, and remove yourself from it if you need be.
Keep your head on a swivel. Don't panic. I mean, that's just one of the hugest things right there. Don't panic. Even if you have to take an extra second, and you might think I'm joking, an extra second. Yeah, take an extra second. A second's a long time. 1,000. Do a mantra. There's a movie that I didn't really ever care for, but I watched it again a couple years ago. And it's going to escape me, but it's kind of like, or maybe it was Hannah. I think it may have been called Hannah. But there's like an evil CIA lady in there, and she's in an incredibly violent, stressful situation, and she kind of freezes for a second. Then her brain kicks in, right? Keep thinking, keep moving, never quit. And she says to herself, get up, get up, get up. That's what you got to do, right? Have those words with your family. Look, a couple of videos ago, somebody helped me edit. I've never edited a video in the whole time of Centerline Systems, right? These are one take videos, but I started talking about something and I got maybe a little bit too, honest about something. And then somebody was like, man, that's just going to scare the shit out of people. You need to cut that out. So, I don't think any of us are trying to scare anybody. This isn't clickbait. I think we're trying to kind of keep it nice and calm and just, let everybody know, man. Yeah, times are already tough. Evil already exists. Accidents happen all the time. Natural disasters happen all the time. Crime happens all the time. Do you really care if it's an IRGC sleeper cell or some random crazy nutcase who's gone to your local bar or, gathering spot and then started shooting people up or stabbing them with a knife or whatever's going on? Nature, or is it Mother Nature? A snake or a grizzly bear doesn't give a shit about who you voted for. I mean, all of these things apply all the time. Go ahead, whoever was talking. I can't remember if that was.
No, I was just going to say, I don't know, a real quick snippet, up here in Atlanta, they're starting to have problems with the kids up there, the under 18s that are going to the malls, and it gets into a real, mob rules situation up there. I mean, that it turns into a frenzy, and these these young people are out late at night. You got a bad actor in there, and the next thing you've got 1,000 people running in one direction, and you're going, what's going on exactly? So they've literally, put some curfews in effect up there in Cumberland and Cobb around in there for the under 18s, because they're starting to get out of control in these groups, and you never know when you're going to be at a mall or shopping center, something like that, and that kind of situation. And that's when you need to, look left and right and then start going in the opposite direction of whatever the disturbance is.
Have a plan. Always have an escape route. Know your entrances, your egress, and ingress and egress. P. Rick, I know you want to jump in on some stuff there. I'm going to shut up.
Yeah, just a couple things to end. I would just want to. I brought up earlier the idea of cognitive warfare, right? How it drives your thinking and sometimes your actions, right? I'd like to say, go ahead and confess that I'm a victim of cognitive warfare on this very podcast, by the nature of the image up in the upper right hand corner. Right. So I saw the bear fighting. I'm like, man, I gotta, something was telling me I need to fight for my life and I need to be as violent as I can. So Mark, you drove that into me. So anyway.
See, but that's when it was used for good. That was the positive thing. That is specifically.
Well, that keeps me, if I'm the guy fighting the bear, it is good. It's keeping me alive, right?
And boys and girls, this wasn't planned. We only had about a 3-minute pregame. And then, because I'm just running with my head cut off today, we only talked for a couple minutes, but Patrick, I put that up there specifically because of you and Clint and what we're talking about. And, never quit. Man, it's a grizzly bear. What the hell am I supposed to do? I don't know. Quit? I mean, is that what you want to do? I mean, fricking fight back somehow. Don't give up. Keep going until there is no more going, right?
Amen. Yeah. Hey, there was if anybody's ever read it, I'm a couple points to wrap it up. The book On Killing. Either on killing or on combat with Colonel Grossman, right?
Grossman. So I'm going to type that in. Keep going. Sorry.
There's a part in the book where he's talking to an SF officer, and he's running his guys through some CQB training, and they're kind of used to the normal, like, oh, hey, they're using Sims rounds. So he ends up, a couple of the guys get shot, and they automatically think, well, I'm out of it. And he's like, no, he's like, you're not out of it until things go black and you're not conscious anymore. So he started carrying around a cattle prod, and he would like zap these guys in the middle of a firefight. It's like, hey, if you get shot, you don't get distracted. Hey, is it still functioning? Is it still working? Can I use it? Keep going. Adapt, right? And I'm proud to say that I met that gentleman, and awesome individual. He's one of my mentors. So there's that. I've seen several comments in here about being following God and being strong in your faith, and I think that's a huge part, right? So I'm a Christian. I'm a proud Christian. Something I'll recommend is an easy thing for anybody to do is follow pray.com and get the daily updates. So it's fantastic. It's just a way to stay close in a very convenient way. But nowhere in the Bible does it say that we need to be weak. It says that we need to be meek. You can be dangerous and capable and be meek. So that's a point I'd like to make for anybody that thinks that Christianity or just being a faithful person is some kind of like docile victim-like creature. That's completely wrong. So some of the most incredibly talented people I've ever met and worked with are strong Christians, and I'm glad I finally woke up to that myself.
Clint, I want to just tell one quick story and then I'll bring it to you for your closing. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Just Patrick, you were just talking with the cattle prod. And look, boys and girls, this isn't look at us or, but sometimes the stories are funny and they're kind of good. And just to Patrick's, I have a story very similar to Patrick's, the story he just related. I was home on leave. I'm still in the agency. Somebody I knew from the military had moved on and was working for a different federal agency. And an individual he knew had left that agency and come over to the agency, right? So they left the whatever department or bureau he was working for, and that person came over to the agency. And I've talked about this person in the past, and that person died in the coast bombing. And I'd done a couple, missions with the guy, and he'd seen a picture of the two of us, and then that's how he put two and two together. found a way to reach out to me, found me. He's a smart guy and working for federal style law enforcement. I'm home on leave, and I go and visit him, and he takes me into their state of the art facility. If anybody knows what a FATS simulator is, or like a sim, you're in a big, like this is all like movie screens, and you can move almost 360, and you're working with a real, like, you can do long guns, handguns, but it's a very great training tool. It doesn't take up a ton of space. It's obviously a lot of money, but it can run you through all kinds of different training scenarios. Well, just to like what Patrick's saying, so you have, they put a device on your belt, and it shocks you. And they set me up for failure because, my buddy was kind of a douche, and he told everybody, well, he wasn't supposed to, but I think he told everybody where I was working, and they set me up in a scenario that, you're going to fail. And I died, but I killed both of the guys that killed me. And I did it while I was falling to the ground. I actually got some props. My shot pattern wasn't super, super tight, but I got 2 in the chest and then 1 right down here, kind of in the upper liver, as I was falling down on that last guy, because they said, man, that thing drops you to the ground. It definitely changes your training perspective when, like, it's, simunitions. I think we should have that, yeah, you get shot, man. You got black and blue marks, or you're feeling it, that shit. Yep. I couldn't control it. It dropped me like all I could do was and fall and shoot, So I guess, my brain is stupid enough to keep doing a few motor functions, as I was going to the ground. All right. That was my stupid little story, just to kind of share some stuff. But Patrick brought it up because that's a really good training technique. So if you get a chance, go read On Killing by Grossman. That was actually one of our mandatory, reading. That's one of the books we read in my master's program. That's how I found out about it. Great book. Clint, let's bring it to you and start wrapping it up.
Oh boy. I was just listening to the story, actually, just kind of thinking about some of the things I had done. But I think
you probably would have shot me in the nuts while I was falling on the ground. You would have been like, hey, that teaches you. You should have been wearing a cup.
I definitely like what Patrick was talking about. Mindset is everything. And I was just recently watching something podcast. They were talking about the one thing in a certain selection you can never say is I quit. In any way, shape, or form. Never say that, because you want people around you that will not quit, and that resolve is what we're all looking for, in our skills and in our person, is to become confident enough in yourself that you can handle these situations. And I guess that rolls back into what I was saying, spend more time not distracted, be in the moment, have a strong will, and, never give up, because everything, my life is just ingrained with, I do this for a certain reason. I do that for a certain reason, because it makes me feel confident in my abilities. So I constantly am setting myself up to be in the best position I can be in.
Yeah. And even if it's a horrible position, make the best out of it, make it the best horrible position you can be in, hey, someone's pissing on my head, but at least I'm not sleeping in shit, or whatever, find a way to make it positive, right? And fight your way through it. Fellas,
a lot of training there that, they're building that resolve. The selections that you go through, and I've been to a few, they want to see you. They want to, and I always joke about it, they give you a pile of crap and they want you to build a castle of gold with it. You better figure it out.
Seriously, and demonstrate that you have and challenge yourself to, think outside the box. Hey, the vehicle's stuck in the sand at Fort McCoy. What do we do? Do we all just quit and give up? Let's try digging it out. Okay, and then while we're trying to dig it out, well, we don't have any, proper pioneer tools. Well, there's a big thing of bark and there's some down trees and we've got our hands, start working on it and then come up with a contingency plan. All right, who's the best runner, or who's got the best rucking time? All right, you're going to start going down, perimeter road until you find somebody, don't give up. Plan and think your way through it.
Yep.
And then
Amen.
execute and do it. Might not be perfect, but don't give up, period. Patrick.
No, that's all I've got, folks. I just want to thank you again for having me on. Glad to see a bunch of the folks in the comments. To George on there. Yeah, we do the same one. So I'll be reading or my wife will be reading a passage out of that in the next 20 minutes. So yeah, God bless you guys.
Clint, sir.
Nope, I'm right with Patrick. Enjoy coming on and chatting a little bit about this stuff, and kind of for the community that's grown around the CLS After Dark. Like to come on here and talk about this stuff, and if any of it helps anybody, great. I mean, like I said, I'm going to be an asset to my team, no matter who I'm around. I want people around me that I know. They're not the weak link.
Yep.
All right. I'm trying to sorry guys, I'm just kind of, as we're wrapping it up, I'm looking at okay. So the gentleman named Corbett has sent me a couple jokes. I'm going to give Corbett a shout out and one of his jokes out here tonight. So here it is, kind of wrapping it up. A man was walking down the road carrying a grandfather clock on his back when a drunk man bumped into him and the clock fell to the ground. "Hey, dude, watch where you're going," he said to the drunk, upset about his broken clock. The drunk replied, "Well, why don't you wear a wristwatch like everyone else?" All right. I think that one, I apologize if I could edit that. Maybe that one wasn't the greatest. I get it. That definitely is a dad joke. Even your kids would look at you like, "I don't even understand that, Dad. What's a grandfather clock?" That's like trying to ask somebody how to use a rotary phone. I don't know what the hell we're talking about. So I should have read that joke first. But hey, my comment I want to leave everybody is again, just keep thinking about it. We can't do this in an hour and a half, 3-hour podcast. It's just impossible. You have to start employing this into your day-to-day grind, into your mindset, into your family functions, your lifestyle, your routines. Breaking up routines. There's a whole litany of things to do. But again, if you just look at where we are right now, whether things do break bad on a military perspective, and we have war on the home front, which we have had for a long time. We've had war on the home front. We have numerous terrorist attacks. We have numerous acts of violence. This happens all the time. So does it really matter if it comes from IRGC, or does it matter if it comes from the deranged nutter down the street who listens to his dog, right? So if it does happen from a nation state, or if this starts getting totally out of control, well, there's just some things we can't control, and just as normal folk, you can't control. So to kind of Patrick and Clint's point, and to quote, C.S. Lewis poorly, but where would you rather be? Hanging out in the bar with your friends and families, having a pint when the balloon goes up, or, living in your whole scared and nervous about it, about nothing you can do about it anyway. The things you can impact, the things you can influence: food, fire, water, shelter, shoot, move, communicate, medicate. Those categories, again, use your own acronym, but you see what I'm getting at. Those are categories you can have a direct impact. And that's just one facet of everything that you probably should be doing if you want to be more prepared, better prepared, more self-reliant. I'm not even going into making your own food. What would you need? Just put yourself through a 72-hour situation. That's what I'll ask everybody. I'll close it on that. I'll give it around to the boys one more time, but give yourself 72 hours. How are you going to handle food, fire, water, shelter, shoot, move, communicate, medicate in 72 hours? And to that, you've got to start doing low impact, high impact, low probability, high probability. In other words, like, okay, if you get a paper cut in 72 hours and you only have 4 bandages, you'll be okay. But if you live in an urban environment and there's gangs running around causing trouble, damage, shooting people, and EMS or the government, the local government isn't responding timely, which many of them aren't in many urban areas. Well, do you have the ability to do basic first aid? Can you do CPR, for the love of Pete? So every one of those things I just mentioned have subcomponents, subtasks, individual tasks, collective tasks, things you and your family need to know how to do, things you need to do, and you can't do them all. So find those other people in your community. Hey, Patrick's way better at this than I am, for example. Well, I don't want to rely completely on Patrick, but he can be the one who shares his knowledge with us, and we all gain at least a little bit more knowledge, and we're a little bit more competent. And with that competency, that proficiency comes, and competency comes confidence. And overconfidence is bad, but confidence in the face of duress, danger, and those uncertain moments. Hey, I know I can run this far, this fast, shoot this well, whatever. I'm going to be okay as long as I don't panic, for example, right? So I'm going to leave it on that, boys. You guys want to chime in with any other final comments, and then we'll take it on out. I'm trying to move past that bad joke as quickly as I can.
Yeah, I'll throw something out there. I think I'll probably screw the line up, but it's from the movie The Departed, where Jack Nicholson's talking to like the young version of Matt Damon. And he's basically saying, hey, whether you're, on the law enforcement side or you're a criminal, if you're staring down the barrel of a gun, what difference does it make? And it goes to like the point Mark was making earlier. It's like, hey, if it doesn't matter what the person's, why they're trying to kill people, that's not the time to figure it out. And I've seen that on the education side, as I taught for a short period of time at a community college, and they brought some people in to do active threat training, and the staff, the faculty, was all the questions were geared around, well, why would someone want to do this? Why would somebody want to do that? It's like, hey, it doesn't matter. But that shows the mentality, right? The avoidance, and let's ignore that there's violence in the world. So there's that. And then the last thing I'll say, because this is another thing we didn't bring up, but it's relevant. And whenever you're traveling away from home, and I just recently had a friend that was on vacation in Mexico when El Mencho was killed, and the cartel Jalisco New Generation started raising hell in Mexico, and they didn't think they were going to be able to get out in time. There you go. There's some questions. Now you're in contingency world. Now you're not on your own turf. You don't control things. What can you do? Right. So, and that I would say that probably applies if you travel anywhere away from home. You don't know what's going to happen where you're going. There's no guarantees, but so do your homework when you travel.
Clint, sir, final comments.
I think I covered most of the stuff, or I'll just be repeating myself. I think that I definitely agree with what Patrick just said. As you move away from the house, there's in town, out of the country. You got to plan for all of that.
Well, boys and girls, I really appreciate take off your hats or raise your glass to Patrick and Clint for coming on. I apologize. I didn't even know it was an hour and a half. I'm looking up at the camera. I just saw we didn't even read anywhere near the chats we normally did, but it looks like you guys were doing quite fine on your own. So I just want to give some shout outs names. We got George, Triple X, John, AK Gimli, Gene from across the pond, Quest Views, John, Gene, Jay Barton, 2770. Thank you, sir, for being in here. Well, in here, I'll show because that's where it's shown, because you already kind of mentioned that. So we got a couple from John, Jay Barton, then we got Learn Me Something, Triple X, Hot Pursuit. I don't think we've seen you there before, but there's another one, Hot Pursuit. So yeah, there's that spirituality and that mental attitude. You better be right there. That uncertainty and that unknown, or that, I don't know how you want to say it, that doubt, that can be a killer real quickly too. I just can. Then we got Gimli again, Learn Me Something, some more Quest Views, Hot Pursuit. I just got to do this real quickly. Triple X. Oh yeah, no, you already respond to that, Patrick, right? This is the one you responded to. Yep. Okay. Yeah, I just saw that and I figured that would be worth. Jay Barton again, some more Hot Pursuit. John, George, Learn Me Something. Yeah, you guys were killing it in the chat. Tennessee. Yeah, you guys were doing, you don't need us. I don't need me reading that stuff. So thanks for being here and in the chat. And I really appreciate it. Thanks again to the boys for showing up here tonight, taking time away from their family. I hope we provided some information, got you thinking. Again, I'm not promoting, my thesis. If anyone's interested, if you like, maybe this is a subject you haven't thought about: terrorism, weapons of mass destruction. What is everybody talking about? What do you mean by sleeper cells and all that? If you're interested, I'm more than willing to share it with anybody. It's, public knowledge. And then for the boys in the chat, stay tuned. I think we're going to end up doing the first 72 hours. I'll throw that out there as an intro for, a handful of people who want to start that. And then we'll just see how that goes. And then maybe I'll keep doing some of that stuff on the side for those people who are interested, and just learning more about the subject, where we can drill into a lot more of the specifics, the specific tools in the toolbox, the specific training mindset. Why would you want to know more of this and less of that? For example, well, again, where do you live? If you live in Minnesota as opposed to Arizona, who do you think's more concerned about water purification and obtaining water? Me with 10,000 lakes and tons of snow, or somebody who lives in the desert and the high mountains, right? You see that what I'm getting at? I mean, one isn't as important as the other all of a sudden, because nature provides and there's an abundance of it, so you would look at different skills that maybe you would prioritize. Anyway, that's it. I really appreciate it. Thank you for watching tonight in the chat and making the comments. And for you, those of you who watch on demand, have fun. We're just trying to share some background and information with you, trying to calm things down, because this is something you've already been doing and you just need to keep practicing on. And who cares what anyone else thinks? I remember doing a class once and I was talking about whistles. I'm going to end it on this note. I have zero problem if somebody, to Patrick's point, I've got my concentric rings. I'm looking and observing. I'm keeping everything, not the Tueler drill, not 21 feet, but even farther out, because if it's wintertime, how am I fighting through all my clothes to get to an appendix carry or even a hip, 3 o'clock? I'm going to fight through 4 layers of clothes, or am I going to wear it up here? How am I going to present? When am I going to start actually trying to obtain my weapon, and at what distance, because somebody can run 21 feet way faster than most people can draw, present, get a good grip, present, and engage. So you got to extend that. Well, I've got zero problem yelling at people. Hey, man, that's close enough. You can back off right now. I've done that. People are like, well, what? I'm like, no, you're close enough. Just stop right there. What do you want? What can I do for you? Well, can I come in and use? No, you can't come in and use my bathroom, or no, I don't need your help with this. And man, I've got zero problem yelling or blowing a whistle. Look, that's not going to, none of those actions are going to save my life. That's going to be up to me. But at a minimum, it'll draw some eyes on there. There'll be witnesses for a potential court case, or witnesses that'll at least confirm, yeah, that's the guy who attacked Mark or killed him, whatever the case is. At least I will still, even if I lose, I'll still go down victorious, because I'll draw attention to you and you will get busted, unless you're that ninja who's hiding over my right shoulder right now that won't show himself until we turn off the camera. You see what I'm saying? So don't ever quit. Keep thinking, keep moving. Don't quit. Plain and simple. Don't ever give up, and don't be afraid of things, because it's your life that's on the line and you're not crazy. I'm not advocating being a knucklehead. You don't brandish weapons. Don't take anything the wrong way, what I just said. I just realized, oh God, there's probably some knucklehead out there. No, I'm not saying you're pointing your handgun or any of that stuff. I was talking about verbal commands. Now, you don't even have to do a verbal command. If you see somebody and they're 40 feet away and you don't like the way it looks, turn around and go back in the shop. Turn around and go back in your house and lock the door. Go to the other aisle, in the parking garage or whatever. That person moves over to the other aisle with you. Move back to the original one more time. That person moves back with you. Well, now you've got, there it is. You already know your answer. Something ain't right. Like that guy's doing something intentionally. Now you're going to start thinking about elevated defense or offense or escape or what you're going to do. Right. So there was what do you care if that person thinks you're crazy? They're walking down and you walk across, to the other aisle and then walk down. They could think you're racist. They could think you're, a phobophobic, whatever, phobophobic, who cares? It's your life. It's your family's life. Be prepared. Keep your head on a swivel. That's all I was trying to say. I kind of went on a rant there, boys.
Yep. No worries. I got to wrap it up, but I want to say thanks again for having me on. This is good, and shout out to all the people that chimed in on the comments for proving that they have an attention span that's a lot faster than swipe left a few times, right?
Amen. Amen.
So,
all right,
all right.
Patrick, Clint, thanks for coming on. All right, boys and girls, thanks for everybody watching. I'll end it on this. Next week, I think I'm going to have Chappie on from the Arizona Trail Vet. We're going to talk about a program that he's got coming up in a charity I'm going to try to set up for in support of his program. I think that's going to be next week. Well, somewhere in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to have Chappie on. I hope I can get Learn Me Something back on to conclude our conversation about disclosure, because kind of to what Clint said earlier, is a lot of what's going on to, distract us from all these other things, the PDF files, disclosure, all this, I don't know, but disclosure, that's an interesting thing. So that's going to be one. And I want to get XXX, if you're still watching, you and I still have an episode to conclude on too, kind of, which actually would dovetail nicely with what we just did here tonight. Have George back on, and we'll talk about more of the things that you can do to help protect your family and your friends and yourself under these type of circumstances. So on that note, really appreciate everybody. Reach out if you got questions. I'll do the best I can to help you out. Till then, keep thinking, keep moving, never quit, and don't give up hope ever. We'll see you guys again soon. Everybody be good.